It's Tuesday, August 6th. I want to talk today briefly about the idea that's been animating some of our editorials and that was brought to us again by an interview with Keith Decker from Highliner Foods that we published today, plus obviously our story on Walmart and Alaska crab yesterday. The idea is this: the issue of sustainability and wild fishery seafood sustainability has changed a great deal over the last 15 years. And as a result, some of the retailer policies are now dysfunctional and they really need to be changed. I want to try to explain why that is. What we've learned, among other things, is that fishery management works. When you have an effective fishery management, you have the resources for enforcement, and you have the resources for science, fishery stocks rebound and habitat is protected. This has been the lesson over and over again in Alaska and Iceland and New Zealand and Norway, and all of these fisheries are fisheries that were the core of what was called MSC qualified fisheries. So many retailers and producers like Highliner Foods said that they wanted to ensure that what they sold would be MSC certified or equivalent. All good. But in addition, there are a lot of producing areas around the world, in Russia, in the Far East, in China, and Vietnam, where there's either not the management resources or infrastructure, so there became fishery improvement projects which were designed to bring about changes in these fisheries to make them more sustainable and more closer to the standards of somebody like the MSC. So a lot of buyers wrote into their policies that they would say MSC or equivalent or with a fishery improvement project. Again, so far all good. Now, what happens over the years if some of the best fisheries leave the MSC, as has happened in Alaska? Keith Decker, in his interview, says that Highliner is totally dependent on Alaska and the Bering Sea fisheries. These are some of the globally best managed fisheries in the world, and yet, as we've seen with Alaska salmon, they are not part of the MSC. Under existing corporate purchase policies, this means that if they're not in the MSC, they should be in some sort of fishery improvement project. And it leads to the absurd situation that somebody like SFP goes to the Alaska salmon industry and says, you won't be able to be purchased by our corporate partners unless you undertake a fishery improvement project. But as somebody said to me yesterday, we have a fishery improvement project. It's called the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And that's what's scientifically demonstrable, is that this in fact works. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with corporate purchase policies that are kind of an absurd contradiction, where on the one hand they say we want MSC or equivalent or a fishery improvement project, but then they look at some of the best managed fisheries that are outside the MSC and say, oh, the only way you qualify is with a fishery improvement project. It doesn't make any sense. So it's really time to change this definition. First of all, I think buyers need to rapidly adjust what they mean by MSC or equivalent. And the best path to this is through this Global Seafood Sustainability Initiative, GSSI, whose aim is, and it's supported by major retailers and major packers pretty much universally, the aim is to create a benchmark which is going to define, yes, this fishery meets our standards for certified sustainable fishery. This fishery does not. Once that's in place, this problem will largely go away. Finally, the last thing I want to point out is that there's far less controversy on the aquaculture side of sustainability than there is on the wild fisheries side. Both the GAA with its best aquaculture practices, the Aquaculture Sustainability Council, or ASC, and Global GAP all have schemes which are in some cases interoperable for certifying seafood produced in shrimp farms and tilapia farms and salmon farms. And in fact, a far greater proportion of aquaculture production is certified sustainable in this fashion than in the wild capture fisheries. What's the difference? Well, part of the difference is the absence of the MSC. And as a result, you don't have this pressure to continually put the standard arbiters at the center of the entire issue of what's sustainable and what isn't. And as the global fisheries improve their sustainability, these arbiters have to move the goalposts or they become irrelevant. And that is, I think, the basic problem. What we're seeing here is the role that the NGOs played 15 years ago when seafood sustainability could arguably be called a crisis is not the same role as they play today. And yet many of them are trying to act as if it is. And that's what's creating this problem. And the quicker that retailers like Walmart, that major producers can adjust their buying guidelines to recognize this fact, i.e. understand what they mean by MSC or equivalent, then the sooner this issue will be put to bed. And we won't have the absurd situation of a company like Walmart saying that the Russian crab fishery, which is rife with IUU fishing and does not have management controls, in their view meets their sustainability policy better than the Alaska crab fishery, which is one of the best managed in the world. I think the problem is the way these standards are written, not the sustainability of these fisheries in Alaska and elsewhere. In Lexington, Mass., this is John Sackton.